Now, let's see. As I recall, we were on chapter 38 and had gotten down to verse 11. Genesis 38, verse 11. Now, you'll recall leading up to this in the first part of chapter 38, Judah had a Canaanite wife. Now, early on, it just says he took her and went into her. Now, again, that can be translated two different ways. Either she took her as a wife or that he just took up with her. It does tell us in the section we're going to get to, I believe we'll get that far tonight, that it lists her as his wife. But again, the question is whether he had taken her as a wife right off the bat or if that was something that happened later. And again, that's not really even relevant to where we're going with all this. But he had 3 sons by her.
Well, I hope we're going to get to the next verse.
Well, we're going to.
Okay, because that's where it did.
Yeah.
That's not that far.
3 sons. 2 of them are dead. One God took because he was evil. The second God took because he didn't do what God wanted him to do to preserve the Messianic line. So now we get down to the 3rd son, who is Shelah, or Shelah, if you want to pronounce it that way. Said then, this is verse 11. Then Judah said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, "Remain a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up." For he thought, "I'm afraid that he too may die like his brothers." So Tamar went and lived in her father's house. Now, what that tells us is that up until this time, she was still under the auspices of her in-laws, that she apparently had been spending most of her time with them. Now, at this point, he tells her, go back and live with your family. But you'll notice that even though he told her to go back and live with her own family, in their custom, since she had married Judah's son, she was still, in their culture, basically the property. I mean, that's kind of pretty much how they looked at it, is she was the property of the in-laws. Even though he's told her, go back and live with your family.
Yeah, but he told her not to to save herself, so.
Well, but see, the issue is, let me just explain why this is relevant. If he had told her, you are released from your obligations to my family, she would have been free to remarry to somebody else. But the fact that he tells her to go live with your family, but remain a widow, they still consider her the property of Judah's family. That even though she is a widow, they don't consider her available to remarry. She is stuck. And essentially she's in a widow's no man's land, that in their culture she belonged. I realize that, a lot of women today just that rankles them the wrong way, but that's just the way the culture was at the time. She belonged to Judah's family. Judah don't want her. He sends her back to her family, but won't let her get remarried. All she's doing is basically living with her family and depending on them for support. So she's in a spot where she's not even allowed to get married.
Wouldn't that have ticked her father off?
Probably.
Because he's stuck with her now, and he can't give her away to some other guy who's going to take her.
Can't give her away, can't have any grandkids because...
He can't get a dowry for her from anybody else.
Because Judah's family won't let her go.
He's getting the short end of the stick.
Now, he could have probably gone to Judah and say, hey, I want you to let my daughter go. Obviously, that didn't happen. And it's clear here from verse 11, Judah's motivation in this is he thinks, okay, already the first 2 boys have just mysteriously died. By the way, you'll notice we're not told here that Judah or anybody in the family knows why the boys died. Now, we're told in Scripture God did it. That doesn't mean they knew that any more than, we know the story of Job, but Job didn't.
So Judah's basically just being superstitious.
More than likely. All he knows is that my first two sons have died under mysterious circumstances. I'm afraid if she marries the third one, he may die too. Because obviously at this point, the third son is now old enough that he could, take her as a wife. Clearly, Tamar's probably a good bit older than him, but still definitely within marrying age. Anyway, so she goes back home. Verse 12. Now, after a considerable time, Shua's daughter, the wife of Judah, died. And when the time of mourning was ended, Judah went up to his sheep shearers at Timnah, he and his friend Hiram, or I think King James calls him Hiram, Hiram the Adullamite. So now, both the older boys are dead. Judah's wife is now dead. So you got Judah, his friend, and the youngest son. Verse 13, it was told to Tamar, behold, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep. So she removed her widow's garments. Notice she's still wearing widow's garments. Removed her widow's garments and covered herself with a veil. Now, anybody know the significance of a veil? Well, possibly. And clearly Judah thought she was a prostitute, but that also meant that those who wore a veil were indicating that they were unmarried and available.
I thought it was a modesty issue, but obviously not.
Well, in their culture, it basically meant that I'm not married and I'm available, which is also why the prostitutes wore them, because they were available, but for a different reason. She covered herself in a veil and wrapped herself and sat in the gateway of Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah had grown up, and she had not been given to him as a wife. Now, when it says a considerable period of time, we don't know how long that was. Could have been,
years.
Yeah, could have been a few months or a few years. Probably no. If it stretched into years, probably not too long, because otherwise, I mean, how old would the youngest brother have been at this point? Definitely old enough to get married, but he hadn't been that long.
So basically, he's really just screwed her over. He told her, remain a widow until my son grows up, but his son's grown up and he has no intention of marrying
None
his son to her.
whatsoever.
So he's just really screwed her over for the rest of her life.
Pretty much.
Nice.
That was his intention. All right, verse 15, when Judah saw her, he thought she was a harlot, for she had covered her face. Now, by the way, do the math on this. She's been definitely married to the oldest son, probably married to the second one, otherwise it wouldn't have been a legitimate levirate marriage. And she had spent a considerable amount of time in Judah's house. Do you think Judah would have recognized her voice?
That's what I was thinking.
Probably so, which tells you not only did she cover herself fairly well and put a veil, and also, what else would she have probably done besides just a veil?
Well, she covered
Probably covered her hair.
Yeah.
And even though Judah would have recognized her voice, that tells him more than likely two things here. Probably didn't have a whole lot of conversation going on between the two, and she probably maybe disguised her voice a little bit so that Judah didn't recognize who she was, because if she'd have spoken normally, what would have Judah done?
known who she was.
He'd have known exactly who she was. So she probably kept the conversation to a minimum and disguised her voice. Now, if Judah thinks she is a prostitute, how much conversation do you think there would have had to have been?
Not much.
Not much.
How much?
Yep.
I got a question.
Yep. How much? She's probably.
Do we know the lag time between when he sent her back home to when this occurs?
No, that's what we were just talking about earlier. The Bible only says there was a considerable time. But whether that means several months or a few years, we don't know. We can only guess. All right. Verse 16. So he turned aside to her by the road and said, "Here now, let me come in to you." For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, "What will you give me that you may come into me?" In other words, how much? She's basically saying, okay, just how much are you willing to pay? He said, "Therefore, I will send you a kid from the flock." She said, "Moreover, will you give a pledge until you send it?" Now, by the way, a kid, young goat, that would have been worth a good bit of money. So she's at least not a cheap prostitute.
I would have a hard time with you telling me, oh baby, I'll send you a young goat.
Yeah, but that would in their culture been the same thing
I
as
know, it's
basically
bartering.
saying, "I'll send you 6 months worth of steaks."
Yeah, it's bartering. I get
That
it.
would have been a lot of cash.
You don't have a veil on anyway.
That's right.
I'd recognize her hair. Yeah. So anyway, bottom line is, she's not entering into this agreement for a cheap amount. A kid was worth a good bit of money, but of course, naturally, it's like, well, where's the kid? So, she's using enough common sense to realize, well, I want something to prove that you're going to come back with the money, or in this case, with the goat. "What will you give me as a pledge?" He said, "What pledge shall I give you?" And she said, "Your seal and your cord." By the way, the seal would have been a signet ring. Because while they didn't have paper and parchment at the time, they did write a lot of things on clay tablets. And the way that, you would sign the tablet as a document is you take your signet ring while that clay was soft and, put your imprint into it. So she's asking for a signet ring and his staff.
His bank account.
What's that?
His bank account.
Yeah. Your seal, your cord, and your staff that is in your hand.
Give me your driver's license and your keys, and you
Pretty
can have
much.
the can to go get the gas.
Yeah. I mean, what she's asking for here is basically she's asking, hand over your driver's license and all your identification, because I know you're not, you're going to come back for them. So he gave them to her, went into her, and she conceived by him. Now, here's the interesting thing. I think this is just one of those things that women just know. I have over the years come across people that thought that, people back then were ignorant. But the fact that he had sex with her one time and she got pregnant, what does that tell you?
He timed it just right.
She knew exactly when she could get pregnant. You better believe she had this time, which tells you that unlike what a lot of people think about the ignorance of folks back then, they might not have known all about DNA and genetics and stuff like that,
He knew his bodies.
but they were not dumb people. They knew what, when a woman could get pregnant. She knew, when the best time was. And so she timed it that she intended to get pregnant. This wasn't just a coincidence. It was her intention for Judah to get her pregnant. All right. Verse 19. Then she arose and departed and removed her veil and put on her widow's garments.
And that's going to be a surprise when she starts showing.
Well, it gets to that too. So she goes back, puts her regular clothes on, and goes back home. But keep in mind, home now is with her family, not Judah's.
And she still got Judah's goods.
And she still got the goods. Verse 20, when Judah sent the kid by his friend the Adullamite to receive the pledge from the woman's hand, he did not find her. Now here's the question. Why did Judah send his buddy to go deal with this and he didn't come back?
Well,
Afraid he'd get caught.
Afraid he'd get caught.
paying off a hooker, man.
He had his phone.
He's paying off a hooker, or what he thinks is a hooker. The Adullamite is just so, that's a friend that, what's the Adullamite, what's he care? He don't care. Like, hey, this ain't my stuff. I'm not the one paying off this hooker. So Judah is basically gone off and figures, I'm not showing my face around there again. I don't want to get caught. I don't want it to get around to the rest of my family what I've been doing. Also, notice that if he's having sex with this woman, obviously she didn't still have her veil on. So how is it that during all this that he still did not recognize her?
It's dark.
Probably a lot of this happened at night. Because even if it had been inside a house during the daytime, enough light would get in that he would have recognized her. So what this tells you is this little soiree happened at night. And that's another reason he probably got in at night, snuck out at night, and figured nobody knows who was there. So the next day, he sends his buddy to go pay her off. Because the Adullamite, he don't care.
After all, what are buddies for?
What are buddies for?
Wingman.
So yeah, the Adullamite gets to do the dirty work because he don't really care. Verse 21. And he asked the men of her place, saying, where's the temple prostitute who was by the road at Enaim? But they said, there's been no temple prostitute here. All right. That's probably about as far as we're going to get. I might get a verse or two more, but let me explain this temple prostitute thing. What's that?
I've heard these, yeah.
And then I have another question.
All right. Well, let me talk about the temple prostitute first. Back then, and also this would have been the type of household gods that Laban would have had. A lot of these people, if they were pagan worshipers, their pagan gods and goddesses usually were fertility gods, which one of the things, and I mean, we hear something like this and we think, how can people be that dumb? But it's a religious belief, and a lot of people even today have some strange, even if they're otherwise intelligent people, when you start talking about religion, people get dumb real quick. They believed that to worship these fertility gods, that if you provided the proper sacrifice, that you would have a good round of crops, or if you were a herdsman, your herd or flock would be highly productive the following year. But now here's where it gets interesting. Guess what the sacrifice usually was? You had sex in the presence of the idol. Yeah. That's why it's referred to as a temple prostitute. Because in where these temples were, And in this case, probably wasn't a temple, might have just been the local brothel that you'd have one of, like, Laban had his little household gods that were no bigger than this. You might have a little god there in the room, and you set up the idol next to the bed. You did the deed, and you figured, okay, now the god has been satisfied. We'll have a good crop next year. Now, that doesn't mean Judah believes this, but what it does tell us is that the local community often, if it was a larger community, they would have a temple where the prostitutes would hang out, and you'd go to the temple, and if you wanted to have a good crop next year, you went and hired yourself a prostitute there at the temple. If it was a smaller town, which Anaim would have been, then you just went to wherever the local brothel was and paid your fee. And if the god was satisfied that you provided the appropriate sacrifice, then you'd have a good crop next year.
Well, you can tell the men came up with all this stuff.
Oh, yeah. Which also may have been why the Adullamite guy, Shua, may not have cared, because that may have been part of his religion. He may have figured, what's the big deal? My buddy Judah is just looking for a good crop. Judah, on the other hand, is just looking for a good time.
Yeah, I was going to say, he wasn't making a sacrifice for a good crop. He was looking for a good time.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
All right, you had a question.
Okay, so if the custom was that when the first son died that she was married to, she went and married the second one so that there could be children. Why, if Judah was a widow, was he not able to be considered?
Because she was his daughter-in-law. It was acceptable to marry the next son in line, but to marry the father was considered a little hinky.
Okay.
They didn't do that. Which is why she had to hide herself.
But it was okay to go get a prostitute, but
It might have been frowned upon too because of the age difference.
Uh-huh.
well, but you got to figure Solomon probably had 15-year-old concubines and stuff. So I think it was a matter of let's just do it.
But
how
you
we want
also
to.
notice that what Solomon did was a sin.
Well, yes.
Which is why Solomon got in trouble later. Because Solomon was specifically told, don't do that, and Solomon did it anyway. Even King David married women that he should not have married. Not the least of which was Bathsheba.
Let me ask you a question.
All right?
Okay, so now she's pregnant with Judah's baby.
Uh-huh.
But actually, the reason so this baby goes to the first son.
Legally speaking,
But the
maybe.
son is dead, isn't he?
Because, well,
No,
yeah,
the
but see,
first son's,
that was the whole point of
family.
leveratic marriage is it didn't matter that's the whole reason that you went and married the second son was to legally, it's just like an
There's
adoption.
an heir.
To produce an heir for the son.
Yeah, you produced an heir for the now deceased son.
And it was a lineage.
Well, now
issue.
here's the
It
issue.
kept that lineage going.
If Judah considered this a legitimate leveratic, not Levitical, leveratic action, then yes, this child would not legally be his. It would be his grandson. The question would be whether Judah and the community considered it a legitimate leveratic marriage. I would venture to say probably not. It would have been considered Judah's son because leveratic marriage usually went from brother to brother or the next nearest relative, but not to a parent, because again, that was forbidden.
Well, you figure too, everything that the parent had was going to be put down to the son, so the parent already had it. So.
And see, that's the whole issue. The entire purpose or custom of leveratic marriage was, as Merrill just mentioned, for the purpose of producing an heir. And when a son died without an heir, that was the hope to like marry the second one so that there will be an heir to inherit his, inheritance. Well, Judah didn't need that.
Yeah.
Judah had an heir,
Yeah.
which is now the third son. So, would it be considered his legal son? Again, that would have been up to the local community. But since Judah just thought he was having sex with a prostitute and did not marry her as a levirate husband, probably not. It probably would have just been considered his illegitimate son. But we're about out of time. We will finish this chapter up on Sunday, and you'll see that Judah did claim the child, but he didn't have any more by Tamar.
Actually, there's 2 children.
Well, from the first wife.
No,
No, she
Tamar
has
has
twins.
twins.
Oh, well, yeah, twins. You're right on that one.
And those 2 twins don't become part of Judah's inheritance. They're not patriarchs of the 12 tribes. So what happens?
No,
to those two-
Judah's the patriarch already.
Yeah, but after he passes, each of his sons become patriarchs of the tribes that follow.
Of their family, but not of the whole tribe.
Right, but what I'm getting at is these 2 disappear from the whole scene.
Mm-mm.
And now for the rest of the story.
The older one becomes part of the messianic line.
Okay? And which one is technically the older one? Because one sticks his hand out first, and they declare him to be the first, and then he goes back inside, and the other one comes out first.
And that one was the one they considered the firstborn.
The one that came out 1st. Or not the one who stuck his hand out.
Yeah, because that would not have been considered a complete birth.
Okay.
But we'll look
I'm
more on
getting ahead.
that.
Sorry, folks. I've been reading
We'll
ahead.
look more. We will cover that in detail on Sunday.
Okay. It's getting interesting.
Yeah. But bottom line is, don't let anybody tell you that the Bible is boring, folks. There are some
Humdingers.